welcome back, IB Nation. Long time no see. It's great to have you back, and we're gonna get after it here. We got a few more topics that we want to discuss, and I have this funny feeling, just this inkling in my head that there's going to be a strongly worded letter written to StreamYard later on tonight.
Oh, yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
It's the feeling that I have. It's a similar feeling that I have when it comes to Notre Dame football 2023.
2 comments, Vince. Number 1, rule number 76, no excuses, play like a champion. We're powering through, no doubt about it. Number 2, I hope that all the bad karma that Notre Dame might have as a football team this year comes on us during the show. I will own it. I will take it because we're taking it away from the Notre Dame football team. So that's where
right.
we're at. But
I like it.
Vince.
I like it.
Little StreamYard problems, little YouTube, whatever the case may be. We're back. We're rocking and rolling. Sounds like it's going good so far. If it starts chopping up again, folks, nothing we can do about it. But we are going to power through because I think us being choppy is still the best thing out there when it comes to podcasts. I don't say that often, but I believe it to be true. And so let's rock and roll, Vince. We got through the player stuff. We went through, the different predictions that we have for this football team and how we think team guys are going to be and breakout players. You went Zeke Correll on offense, or underrated Zeke Correll on offense. You had great reasoning why. I agree. We didn't get a chance to get into really Howard Cross defensively, but I'm right there with you. I think the only other person I could go on defense would maybe be Jack Kaiser.
Okay.
I think Jack Kaiser would be another one there. But
I thought about him as well, to be honest with you. He was one of the guys.
Still has like that little fan base, right?
Yes.
Where like there's no Howard Cross fan base outside of like the Howard Cross family. And Howard Cross is a very underrated, underappreciated player. If like Riley Mills has a breakout and all that, we're going to talk about those guys. And not enough people talk about how just important Howard Cross has been to this football team. And that's not a projection. That's just looking at what he was last year and then thinking he's going to be that guy again. So, but we got people coming through doors and all types of stuff, man. But we are ready to rock and roll. So we kind of got through some of that stuff, Vince. So now the big tease, I promise you we're not doing this on purpose. It's time to kind of go through the season.
Okay.
And we're going to go game by game, and we're going to make our predictions for whether we think Notre Dame is going to win or lose based on where they're at now. And we're going to have some fun with it. Okay. And then we're going to make our prediction at the end. We're going to make our prediction, go with that. And then we're gonna tell us where we think Notre Dame will be playing in the postseason. Then we'll get into our college football predictions. We'll get into our conference champions, and then we are going to have to make our final prediction for who we have in the college football playoff.
Boom.
That is where we're going to be.
Boom.
So we're going to have a little bit of fun with this event. So let's kick it. Why don't you?
Okay.
Do you have the schedule up in front of you, Vince?
It's right in front of me.
Read off the 2023 schedule, and then we'll go game by game, briefly talk about it, and give our prediction and have some fun with it.
All right,
so score predictions. That'll come each week of each game.
I was going to say, I'm not prepared to do score predictions.
We're going to do that next week. The first one will be next week. The Navy will be next week. And we'll actually be doing just a little tease. We're going to be doing predictions this year on Thursday because during the season in the past, the mailbag went away.
Right.
This year, we're going to keep the Friday free-for-all. Vince just can't go away anymore. So the Friday mailbag is going to stay. We're going to do our prediction shows and our keys to victory shows on Thursday now. So a little bit of a change up this year. We're going to try to keep it fresh. But
that's what we do.
So let's why don't you go ahead and rock through that schedule here.
All right. August 26th, we all know 10 days from now, Navy, Notre Dame, Aviva Stadium, Dublin, Ireland, 2:30 kickoff. Week 0, baby. Notre Dame, Navy, followed by a week later, Tennessee State comes to Notre Dame Stadium on September 2nd. Then Notre Dame's first true road game against NC State on September 9th. That's a noon kickoff. September 16th, back at Notre Dame Stadium, Central Michigan. Then September 23rd, Ohio State at home. That's the first night game of the season. Then, of course, they go on the road to the Dukies of Duke, September 30th. TBA on the time, because that's what they always do with away games. October 7th, another away game, Louisville. At Papa John's Cardinal Stadium. Then back home for yet another night game at Notre Dame Stadium. October 14th, Southern Cal comes to visit. Another home game after the bye week will be Pitt on October 28th. Then on the road, Clemson, November 4th. assuming that's probably going to be a night game as well. Then another bye, then November 18th at home, Wake Forest at
Senior day.
3:30.
Yep,
That's right. Last home game of the season. And then, of course, they finish it off on the road in California against Stanford on November 25th. So that's your season, all 12 games.
And for now, Vince, obviously that is kind of where we are with the schedule. I think this is a big picture, a very challenging schedule. It's one that not only has the big three. I think one of the things that gets overlooked about the schedule is the depth of the schedule. I believe it's I think 8 teams on the current schedule made a bowl game last year, right? Navy didn't make a bowl game. Tennessee State didn't make a bowl game. Central Michigan didn't make a bowl game, and Stanford didn't make a bowl game. Everybody else did. Matter of fact, I think everybody else in the schedule won at least 8 games on next season. So I'm actually pretty sure of this. Actually, now I want to remind myself. I'm pretty sure that everybody on Notre Dame's schedule this year won at least 8 games. I know that. As far as the bowl team, so I know NC State won 8 last season, so they went 8-5 last year and lost a bowl game. Wake Forest won 8-5 last year, lost a bowl game. Clemson won 11 games. Louisville went 8-5 last season. Pitt went 9-4 last year. Duke went 9-4 last year. So all the ACC teams won at least 8 games last season. Notre Dame plays Ohio State. They won 11 games last season. USC won 11 games last year. So, yeah, unless I'm missing someone, of the teams that Notre Dame played that played in bowl games, Vince, all of them won at least 8 games. So it's the depth of the schedule that makes it challenging to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they've got 3 teams ranked ahead of them right now than where they're ranked preseason. So, again, like I said before, Notre Dame has every opportunity to work their way up the polls, all of those different things. It's not like Notre Dame is staring at like a Michigan schedule. Now, Michigan's already at the top. They can't go any higher. But like if they were, let's say they were 15 and they roll
a freaking joke.
They roll through that schedule. Are you really going to be like, oh gosh, they got to climb the polls because they're winning these games? You know what I mean? So
yeah, they're going to climb the polls just because they're beating up a bunch of bad teams and other teams are losing games. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Exactly. But Notre Dame has an opportunity to really prove themselves with their schedule. Look, there's not going to be anybody to blame except Notre Dame if Notre Dame doesn't take care of their business, right? They've got every opportunity to do it. And so they're not going to need help from other people. Yes, they will to a degree, like every
if they
year.
don't run the table. If they go 12-0, they're in. I mean, that's
of course.
I think 11-1, they're going to be hard to keep out. It's just the argument you and I had a couple weeks ago about they will need some help. They can't have 5 conference champions that are 12-0. They're not going to get in, right?
Correct.
I mean, you need some losses. But yeah, 11-1 with this schedule should make this Notre Dame team likely a playoff team.
Absolutely. So they've got everything in front of them. This schedule sets up nicely, in my opinion, for them to take care of their own business. So that's the important thing.
So
here we go. Ready? So week 1, Notre Dame Navy. We're just going wins and losses at this point. I would be shocked if you said Notre Dame was going to lose this game. I've got them winning.
Yeah. Vince, I said this today to my dad. No, was it my dad? Was it who did I say this to earlier? Was it I was talking to somebody today, and my whole thing with Navy is I don't care about the score. With Navy, dude, it's just survive and advance because there's just so. I was talking to Brian Smith. That's what I was talking to. I mean, you've got 2 new coordinators. Your offense, like, there's a bunch of stuff. What are they going to be running? Are they going to be running this? Going to be running that? There's all these. You're playing in Ireland. I don't care what the score is. I don't. And I know Notre Dame fans, I saw the prediction some of you were putting in there 50-10. And that'd be great. That's what Notre Dame should do. But honestly, with this opponent, I don't care. Win the game, come out healthy, come back and get yourself right against Tennessee State. I mean, like, honestly, Vince, with this Navy game, because of the uncertainty of everything, I don't even care what the score is. Just win it, right? Yeah. Just be 1-0. And then you've got the next 4 weeks to – 2 of the next 3 weeks, I should say, where they're get-right games. You got to get-right game against Tennessee State before you got to go play NC State. And then, survive and advance that game, and a get-right game against Central Michigan. So you got 4 games to kind of get ready for that big game in Ohio State. And so I think they start off with a win. I don't really know what it's going to look like, but I don't care. It's just Notre Dame's going to get that W in the opener, should get that W in the opener, and come out of that game 1-0. So, yeah, we both have Notre Dame 1-0.
Yeah, I do care to a degree how Notre Dame looks. I'm with you 100%. At the end of the day, it's winning. That's what matters. And
I won't say
especially
that in future games, but that one.
no, I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally understand where you're coming from. And then you throw on top of it the fact that they're going to be in Ireland. I mean, that just throws a whole other ball of wax at this game, right? And so I agree with you. They want to get out of here with a win. I'm going to be greedy, and I'm going to say there's certain things I want to see offensively and defensively, but more offensively from this team in this game than just getting a win. I'll say it. I do feel that way. But at the end of the day, if they happen to squeak out a victory, awesome. Let's move on. Let's go.
I'm not saying I'm okay with it. It's just
right,
like, look,
right,
man,
right.
just the nature of all this craziness. Just get the W and get out of it. Just get the
and it's
win
a lot of
and move on
craziness
to the next week. Yeah.
I mean, they're traveling on a different day than they normally would. They're
I think they're going like on a Wednesday, I think, right?
Yes, they're leaving on Wednesday. They're practicing there, which of course makes sense because they're in Ireland, but that's not the norm when you go on an away game. You know what I mean? And so just the whole thing's just different and it's messed up. And the win at the end of the day is the most important. No doubt about that. So that's week one. We both have Notre Dame winning that game, not surprisingly. Tennessee State, Notre Dame welcomes them for the first home game of week the season.
This is week one. Tennessee State.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I always think of it as week one because
it should be the first week there are games. It should be week one.
Yes. This whole week zero thing is just weird. But Tennessee State comes to Notre Dame Stadium. It's the first FCS team that Notre Dame has ever played. We can get over that, I guess. I'm still upset about it, but whatever.
2-0.
It is what it is.
Right.
It's 100%. Right.
If you're going to play an FCS game, I'm good with it being this type of game. You know, it is what it is. I would have still preferred a little bit more of a traditional HBCU program. I would have preferred more of a Grambling, a Southern, something like that. But I like what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, I get it.
I'm all for lifting up others. I'm all
Sure.
for that, right? And these are programs that need the money. Number one,
yeah, sure.
These are programs that need that publicity. I mean, they're considered like when I was at Duquesne, we were at 1AA, but at the time we were considered like mid-major 1AA, like not even like the full 1AA.
Gotcha.
And that's how the HBCUs are. That's how the MEAC and the SWAC are. Is they're not considered like full 1AA.
Right.
I think they play for their own championship and all this other kind of stuff. Although I did watch Howard play in the playoff when I was visiting William and Mary for a visit. They played Howard in a playoff game.
Okay.
I mean, it is what it is. It's 2-0. It needs to be a blowout, and
absolutely,
it's a get right game. So 2-0.
Yep, absolutely. Game 3. First official road game, first true road game of the season in week 2. NC State, noon kickoff, September 9th.
Let's just go game 3 because this whole week thing is so confusing
for me.
So let's just go game 3.
That's to be wrong.
So confusing.
Third game of the season.
There you go.
Is NC State. Third game of the season, NC State on the road, Brian. And I know this could be a trap game for a lot of people. And this is the first big test for Notre Dame.
This is the first potential game you could see them if they don't play well catching an L. No doubt.
And if you're telling me, okay, Notre Dame's going to lose to not one of the top 3, but they're going to lose a game. This is the one I want them to lose, but I'm not going to predict that happening. Yeah. So I've got Notre Dame winning this game.
Yeah. They have one game beforehand at UConn. Like, Notre Dame kind of gets to get their feet wet against Navy and Tennessee State. They get one game. And, we'll see what it does. I think this is a game Notre Dame wins. I like NC State. I'm higher on NC State than most.
Sure.
I just have a hard time seeing them beat Notre Dame in game 2 of the new OC. Like, this is one of those teams I wouldn't want to play in November. It might be a little tougher in November. I'm not saying like they beat Notre Dame. I'm saying it'd be a tougher game. They've got more games under their belts in the Robert and Knight defense or offense. They'd have more games. The tough losses that they've had personnel-wise, those replacements would have more experience. But it'll be a good test, but I think Notre Dame should win this game. I mean, they've dominated the ACC.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the game that necessarily that they're going to.
They haven't lost to the ACC in what, a few years? If I'm not
right. In regular season, I don't think they've lost an ACC team since 2017, Miami. Because 2018, they didn't lose any regular season games. 2019, they lost to Georgia and Michigan. 2020, unless you want to count the ACC title game as a regular season game, I don't. It's considered a postseason game.
Postseason game, yeah.
2021, they only lost to Cincinnati. And then last year, they didn't lose to an ACC team. They lost to a Big Ten team, a Conference USA team, a Pac-12 team and then 2 Pac-12 teams last year.
God.
So, and then they went undefeated against the SEC. I just like to say that they went undefeated against the SEC.
Did. I mean, they did.
So,
it's just a fact. So I don't see that streak stopping at this point.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I see them beating NC State 3-0.
Yeah, absolutely. So game 4, here we go. Back home, Notre Dame Stadium, September 16th, Central Michigan, another marriage with the MAC.
Yeah.
What say you about
somebody
Central
earlier,
Michigan?
Vince, asked who was the coach for that Florida team that beat Georgia in 2016. Somebody asked me that question. And it was Jim McElwain, who is now the head football coach at Central Michigan. But there's a reason that Jim McElwain is now at Central Michigan.
Sure.
So
you're not wrong.
But no, this is another get right game. This is what this needs to be. It's a get right game. You hope that you're playing your backups in the third quarter. That's the hope.
Of course.
The last couple MAC opponents have been a little bit back and forth. Obviously, 2021, you had a really close game against Toledo. 2019, you blew out Bowling Green. This needs to be more like that. Toledo or Central Michigan is better than Bowling Green in 2019, but not by a ton. And they're not as talented, in my opinion, as Toledo. They've got some good players, but they're a 4-8 MAC team. Simple as that. This needs to be 4-0, and it needs to be a not competitive 4-0. If Notre Dame is going into this next game we're going to talk about after this one, and they don't have at least 2 giant blowouts on their then I'm going to be a little concerned going into game 5. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yep, absolutely agree. You and I both have Notre Dame 4-0 going into the arguably the biggest home game of the year, depending on how you look at things. It's the first big home game of the year to me, so it's the biggest up to this point. 4-0 Notre Dame going into their own stadium.
It'll be 3-0, in my opinion. Ohio State is what I think.
Agreed. Yeah. So 2 undefeated teams, probably a top 10 matchup would be my guess at that point.
Yeah, I think by then, because you're going to have a couple top 10 versus top 10 games by then. Like Bama will have played Texas, right? I believe that's in week 2, if I remember correctly, right? Or they both play in week 2, so that'll be the same weekend Notre Dame plays NC State. It's that same week that those 2 teams play. So I'm actually pulling up the schedule. There's obviously LSU and Florida State play each other in week 2, so that'll be another game between 2 highly ranked teams. So at worst, Vince, 2 teams ranked ahead of Notre Dame will have lost by then. It's impossible for that not to be true, because number 11 Texas plays at number 4 Alabama in week 2. In week 1, you've got number 5 LSU, number 4 LSU right now. Let me find that one here real fast. It's because that's a night game, so that'll be down here. I believe it's a night game, right? Where is LSU versus Florida State? That's week 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's on Sunday. Year. That's where it is. It's on Sunday. It's Sunday night. Okay. So it's number 5 LSU but it's in Florida, but it's in Orlando against number 8 Florida State. So you'll have at least 2 teams that are ranked ahead of Notre Dame. There's no chance that 2 of them won't have a loss.
Sure.
So then, there's always potential for other upsets. Let's say Utah gets upset by Florida. That game happens before, or Utah could get beat by Baylor. They play both of those teams before Notre Dame. And although Utah is ranked behind them in at least one poll, so Utah may not actually be there, but you've got a couple other of games that could potentially see a team lose, but there's definitely a chance that it could be a top 10 matchup.
I feel like it will be. At
the very least, Notre Dame will be 11th at worst. To me, at worst, they'll be 11th.
Fair enough. So top 10 matchup, night game, Notre Dame Stadium, Ohio State. This is the big one. I mean, this is the 2012 Stanford. In my opinion, it's and now and even more so
player version.
Vince, yes, that's what I was referring to. I mean, obviously Stanford and Ohio State from a national perspective is different, but Notre Dame hasn't beaten Ohio State in ever.
At the time, coming into that, Stanford was really freaking good.
Right,
coming into that period of time. I mean, you're talking about a team that was coming off. Well, in 2011, wasn't that the year that they lost to Oklahoma State in like just a phenomenal game in the Fiesta Bowl? Stanford finished 7th the year before. If you remember 2011, they lost to Oklahoma State 41-38 in the Fiesta Bowl in overtime, and that Oklahoma State team should have been playing for the championship that year. They got screwed. out of that. That was the year that the only loss they had was on the Thursday night game at Iowa State. And it was like the day of or the day after there was that plane crash that killed some faculty members. You know, they just shouldn't have been playing that football game. And they lost that game, and they should have been playing LSU for the title that year. And I think Oklahoma State would have won, to be completely honest with you. And then the year before that, which was Harbaugh's last year, Vince, Stanford beat Virginia Tech in a bowl game in the Orange Bowl, I believe, finished 4th nationally. So Stanford was coming off of a couple years where they were a really good football team. And then that 2012 season, Stanford finished that year 7th in the polls. If you remember, beat Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl that year, beat number 1 Oregon on the road that year. So you beat number 2 USC that year.
Yeah.
So 2012 Stanford was a dominant team that was kind of finishing in the rankings similar close to Ohio State. But to your point, it's more of in the heads of the Notre Dame players, this is a program they had no experience winning against.
Bingo.
And outside of the freshmen and sophomores, every kid on this football team, outside of the freshmen, every kid on this football team is experienced beating Clemson. Outside of the freshmen and Sam Hartman and Thomas Harper and those kind of guys. But you get Javonte Jean-Baptiste, he's beaten some big time programs, right? He was at Ohio State when they beat Clemson a couple years ago. So he has beat Clemson now that I think about it. You look at the sophomores, don't know what it's like to beat USC, but everybody else does on the team. They don't know what it's like to beat Ohio State. That's the reality of it. And this is a game you and I have talked about already. This is the sort of the show me game if you're Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
100%. More than any other on the schedule. Ohio State may not even be the best team they play this year. We'll see. I expect them to be. My thoughts on Ohio State this year. I think they're going to fix some of their issues, but I think some of the things that lead people to say maybe Ohio State won't be as good this year are valid. Quarterback, O-line, some secondary. Sure. Those are all fair things, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to find out who Notre Dame is going to show their mental grit.
Absolutely.
In this game more than any other events.
Right. And this is the one. Look, if I'm not mistaken, they haven't beaten Ohio State since you and I have been alive, right? So
now again, somebody got upset about that on the message board. Well, no, Vince, that's because they've only played 5 times. I didn't say they've played every year in my 45 years of life.
Yeah, that's not the point.
What I'm saying is in my 45 years of life, Notre Dame and Ohio State, they've never beaten Ohio State. Now they've played 5 times, and so when you've played 5 times, you can't tell me that there's not a chance in there. Couldn't have you played them, in my lifetime, they've played a home and home in the 90s. They played in the Fiesta Bowl in 2005. They played in the Fiesta Bowl in 2015, and they played at Ohio State last year. They haven't beat them yet. And the perception, Vince, is that Ohio State's the only team in the league of Alabama and Georgia. That's the perception right now.
Correct.
They're preseason top 3-4 team. This is a show me game. This is your statement game to college football that, yes, we are that team, right? You can tell us we don't have the talent. We don't have this. I'm too young of a coach. Jared Parker's never called a game before. Al Golden's this. Al Washington's that. Notre Dame doesn't have this. Sam Hartman's a system guy. All that stuff gets thrown out the window if you win this game. And in my prediction, right now, it'll be that way. And unless Notre Dame's like 2-2 going into this game, my prediction right now is Notre Dame is going to beat Ohio State this year. This is that statement game that Notre Dame needs to make. I think they're going to make it, and it's not just emotion; it's matchups.
Right.
Ohio State kicked Notre Dame's butt in the trenches last year. I don't think they're going to be as good on the offensive line this year. They lost 3 really good players, including a guy that was the number 6 overall draft pick this past year. The replacements are not great. Let's just say that, right?
Sure.
Their D-line should be pretty good, but I think there's other areas where Notre Dame matches up pretty well with them. This is going to be the most skilled talent Notre Dame is going to face all year on the perimeter and at running back. But I think this is a game where if the D-line is what you and I think it is, this is the game they prove it.
Right.
I think Al Washington's going to get a little bit of payback against a school that kind of screwed him over, convinced him not to take the Tennessee defensive coordinator job and then fired him a year later as a scapegoat for the defensive coordinator decision that Ryan Day had made.
Right.
And that's the perception of it. Right. And so I think there's a lot that goes into this one. And I think Notre Dame gets their payback and improves to 5-0 and will vault up the national rankings after that win.
Well, and I think, you talk about Ohio State being really good at the skill positions. They are. There's no doubt about it. But I think Notre Dame's pretty good at the skill positions too. And I think Look, Ohio State has the number 1 wide receiving core in the nation. I'm not arguing with that.
If you took Ohio State's backup receivers and took out Emeka and Marvin Harrison, that is a top 10 receiving core.
Right. No doubt about it.
That's how good they are at wide receiver.
There's no doubt about it. And I am not saying that they're not good.
But that was also true last year when they played.
Right. And where's Notre Dame's strength?
Right.
I mean, I'm intrigued by these matchups, number one. Right. And I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to neutralize their wide receivers, but I think they can do enough
where
the interior, the trenches become absolutely important. And that's where I think Notre Dame can have an advantage.
You know what it is, Vince? They need to do to Ohio State what Ohio State did to Notre Dame last year. If you go back and watch that game, there were 3 or 4 opportunities for Notre Dame to have big plays in the pass game. You and I were sitting by each other in that game, and we're like, oh, my God, Braden Lindsey was open by like 3 or 4 steps, but Tyler got hit in the face because they didn't pick up the delay blitz. Or, oh, man, he had Lorenzo Styles, but Tyler overthrew it because he was getting hit. There were just those opportunities to where, you got beat in the trenches, which prevented you from making more plays on the perimeter with your receiving core. Right. That's the thing is, we shut down Marvin Harrison. No, you didn't. He was getting open, but the quarterback was laying on his back when he came open. Right. It needs to be that kind of thing where, he was missing. Yeah, Marvin had you by a step, but the quarterback overthrew it because the pressure was in his face. It needs to be that kind of thing where, you hold your own against him, but even the times he beat you, it doesn't matter because you were putting pressure on the quarterback.
Right.
That's where it needs to be.
Absolutely.
Where the quarterback can't be pinpoint accurate. Because if the quarterback has got time to throw, I don't care how good your corners are. Marvin Harrison's going to get his. Emeka's going to get his. It's just the reality of it. That's the nature of offense versus defense in games. If you're not getting a pass rush and you've got a decent quarterback with great receivers, they're going to get theirs. That's why this matchup has to be won in the trenches, and that's where I'm most confident, at least on defense. I'm actually a little bit concerned about the Notre Dame O-line, about how quickly it's going to get rolling, and I just need to see it. You know what I mean?
And we've got 4 games to see
about it.
We've got 4 games to see where they're at, and that'll really tell me if my prediction on August 16th is the same as it will be the day before, 2 days before, like September 21st or whenever we're going to do our picks or have those submitted. You know what I mean? And so right now I have Notre Dame winning this game. I think it's going to be a drop down, drag out. Like this isn't going to be Clemson 2022 like that. I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competitive game.
I think it's going to be very competitive. I think it's going to be a great game. I'm really looking forward to this game, but I think Notre Dame wins it. I think they get the monkey off their back.
31-27. It's good to me. It's kind of like the reverse of the Florida State game in 2014. Just the opposite happens. Notre Dame wins this one. It's that kind of game. It's going to be a great game in my opinion. It is. Right. It's going to be a back and forth game. It's just I think that I'm betting on the team with the better quarterback. Basically, is where I'm going. With it on this one.
Yep, absolutely. So we got Notre Dame at 5-0 at this point, and now they have to go on the road after Ohio State and a big win and an emotional victory and play against Duke, a sneaky good team, a team that is on the rise, no doubt about that. This is and it's not Marshall because they're way better than Marshall was, but it's still the week after Ohio State. So this is the trap game everybody's talking about, September 30th on the road. Yep.
I got Notre Dame winning this one, Vince. I do. I'll say this. No, I'm gonna say it at the end because then it'll give it away a little bit.
Okay.
This is a game that should concern some of you because there are certain ingredients that go into being a team that can upset a team. If Notre Dame is as good as we think they can be, let's just say Notre Dame is a legit title contender. Let's just say they are. This is the kind of team that scares me a little bit. Because it's the recipe for an upset. It's the week after the biggest game you've played in decades, right? It's at least with fans in the stands, right? I mean, you could argue Clemson 2020 was that game, but there was nobody in the stands, really just some students. It's a team that has a mobile quarterback that can make plays with his legs. He's got good skill talent. They can score points, and they have a very fundamentally sound, well-coached defense, and I love their head football coach. Right. And it's on the road. It's just a recipe for a potential upset. I just don't think it's going to happen. I have Notre Dame winning this game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than some Notre Dame fans are going to think. But this is one of those games, Vince, for me, that if you beat Ohio State, it does not matter what the score is against Duke, as long as at the end of the game, you have more points than they have.
Sure.
It's just, there's going to be 3 or 4 games this year, folks. You're going to hear me say this. I don't care what the score is, just win. And this next 2 games are that way for me, to be honest with you. It's just get the W, because you're not going to blow people out every week. I mean, LSU 2019 was probably the most dominant team I've ever seen in my life. Would you agree with that, Vince? I mean, just as far as running through the entire season, just a tremendously dominant football team. I've never seen anything like it, right? But even that team had to go on the road and scrape and battle and claw to beat Texas by a touchdown. And that wasn't a great Texas team, right? That Texas team that year finished 8-5. You know, they lost to Oklahoma that year, lost by 10 to TCU, lost to Iowa State, lost by 2 touchdowns to Baylor, right? That was not a great Texas team. That LSU team in 2019, you know, had to scrap, fight, and claw to beat Auburn 23-20. That's it.
Well, good point.
That's it. And that was a 9-4 Auburn team. That was a decent Auburn team. But, you know, 2 weeks before, Auburn had lost to Florida by 11. A couple weeks later, they lost at home to Georgia. They lost to Minnesota in a bowl game. And they took LSU down to the wire. The point being, even the greatest teams have those games where, man, you just, for whatever reason, you don't have it. You've got to scrape, you've got to fight, you've got to claw to be that kind of team. And the reason I say LSU, because the most explosive team I'd seen before that was probably 08 Oklahoma, but that 08 Oklahoma team lost a game in the regular season by 10 to Texas.
Right.
So, you know, that LSU team was probably the most dominant I've ever seen, again, with a team that played a good schedule. Clemson, Florida State 2013 was dominant. They played a terrible schedule. They played a borderline Michigan schedule that year. Yeah, not quite, but close. But yeah, I mean, so there's games where, dude, it's just like, look, man, just survive in advance. There's going to be 3 or 4 games like that this year against teams that, or I say 2 or 3 games like that against teams that you expect them to blow them out, and they're not. But you just got to survive in advance, man. You just do. Somebody just pointed out, look at Georgia and Missouri last year. Perfect example.
Sure.
Of exactly what we're talking about. You're going to have that, folks. You're just going to have those games. You know, Georgia against, Clemson 2 years ago, right? I think back to Alabama's first title team. Do you remember that year? I think it was 2009. Alabama played, I'm trying to remember. Let me just pull up out. I think it was 2009. It might have been 08, but yeah, 2009. Yeah, they beat Tennessee 12-10. That was a 7-6 Tennessee team, and I think they blocked like 2 field goals in that game. Alabama did to win that game, and you're just going to have games like that. Vince.
Sure, no, I get that.
And that LSU team, by the way, went 7-6. Or Tennessee team, I mean, went 7-6, right? You're just going to have days like that.
For sure.
That year, that Alabama team beat an Auburn team that went 8-5 by 5 points. You know, you survive in advance. And this Duke game is at the very top, or in the top 2. You could argue the Navy game also, but this is just one of those. If you beat Ohio State, man, it does not matter what the score is. Just get that W.
Sure.
Just don't stub your toe. Get that W.
I'm very interested to see how good this Duke team is this year, right? They had a huge turnaround from 2 years ago to last year. Can they keep that rolling? You know what I mean? Can they build off of that? That's going to be a big question mark for Duke. Where it is situated on Notre Dame's schedule obviously worries me. Here's the difference, in my opinion, from last year to this year. Look, we started the show off by talking about who Marcus Freeman is, who we think he is, who he has to be. This week right here shows me if Marcus Freeman has taken a step as a head coach. Him beating Ohio State, it's huge. Don't get me wrong. It's huge. I've seen him win a big game. This is a big game. I've seen him do it at home. I've seen him do it. Ohio State will still be bigger than Clemson, but you get where I'm going with this, right? How does he get the team ready to go for the next game?
Yeah.
Didn't do a very good job of that last year. Has he matured? Has he figured out who he is as a head coach, how to get his team prepared for that next week? If he goes out and they take care of business, look, they're more talented than Duke. We can all agree on that. They should win this game. Right? This is the game that they should win, but it's still the week after Ohio State.
Right.
How does Marcus Freeman get his team ready? If they come out firing on all cylinders, I don't think this game's going to be all that close, because I just don't. And so I see everything that you're saying, and I get it, that winning is by far the most important thing here. By far. You've got to get that W. I just think if he has them prepared I think he's going to have them prepared, I don't know if this game's going to be close. That's where I'm at right now.
I get what you're saying, but I'm just saying, I'm looking at the history of college football.
I get it.
And I don't care how good of a coach you are, you're going to have weeks like that. Somebody pointed out the Notre Dame in '88 team, and they used Michigan. I don't think that's a great example. It was a season opener, and Michigan finished as a top 5 team that year. But I remember the Pitt game the week before they played Miami, and Notre Dame won 30-20, but that was an ugly game. I mean, that was a really ugly game against a not very good Pitt team.
Right.
Pitt that year finished 6-5. They weren't a very good football team that year. West Virginia beat them by 21 a couple weeks before that, right? Like, they just weren't that good. But they were looking ahead to, Miami. I mean, that's just the reality of it. They weren't that sharp against Michigan State that year. My whole point is you're getting them ready to play means you win. That's it. Like, it doesn't mean that you got to beat them by he had them ready to play. They won by 20. And if they only win by 3, he didn't really have them ready to play. I mean, these are still teenagers and early 20-somethings, and they're going to have their emotions. I don't care what you do. And that's why Lou Holtz was the way he was during weeks when they played bad teams, because he knew that's how young people were. But it's also just about, I think this is a good Duke football team. I mean, that's the other thing too. This is a good football team. And so whenever you're playing a good football team on the road, just get the win. That's what it is for me. But we both have them winning.
Yes.
And
at the end of the day, we both have. Yeah, we have this one as a win. No doubt about that. So back-to-back road games. They're going to go to Louisville the next week. TBA on the time, but it's still on the road against Louisville. New head coach.
I think it's a night game. I'm really hoping it's a night game.
You and me both. I agree with that completely. But, we'll
I wouldn't mind sitting in the hotel that Saturday morning watching some college
football. I wonder what the slate is that day, because I would be looking forward to that as well. But they've got Louisville on the road, 2 road games in a row. And this may be the only time in the season where they have 2 road games in a row. Am I wrong about that?
It is the only time all season. Yeah, because they play Navy on the road, then they're home. They play NC State at home, and then they're on the road, then they're home.
Right.
After USC, they play Pitt at home, then at Clemson, then they're back home against Wake, and then they're at Stanford. So and what helps is because they begin and end the season with road games. So that means in between, there's more home games than road games, which makes it easier to not have 2 in a row. So
makes sense. And usually teams have more home games anyway than road games in the first place. And so,
And they're basically 6-5-1 this year, I believe, right? Okay. 6 home, 5 roads, 1 neutral, right? Because they're home against Tennessee State, Central Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Pitt, and Wake, right? So 6-5-1 is this year's deal. So the point is, if you get the 2 out of the way at the beginning, they're 6-4, 6 at home, 4 away in some sort of a way. And so that's how they're able to not have any more back-to-backs, which is good.
Yep. So new coaching staff at Louisville. You're in the middle of the season at this point. You're in October. You and I both have Notre Dame undefeated at this point. How do you see the Louisville game playing out?
I think this is going to be a win. I think that this is a better matchup for Notre Dame than Duke, because they're going to have a quarter. I mean, if Notre Dame, this is the one I would say, if Marcus Freeman has them ready at all, this is a game they should win somewhat convincingly. I think this game concerns me a little less than the Duke game. It's still a just win, man. You got USC coming up. I can understand if they're overlooking it. You just beat Ohio State. You just beat Duke. You're feeling good about yourselves. Louisville's going to be a good team that week or that year, but I don't know that they're going to be like a great team, just because they are making I wouldn't say a drastic change to Jeff Brom's system, but they're making a change. And the quarterback that he has now knows the system, but he also got beat out by Aiden O'Connell and transferred to Cal, right? I mean, that's part of it too. So, when I look at this team, Vince, I think Louisville's going to be a quality team this year, but it's a not great matchup for them when you look at them against Notre Dame, because they're going to have a quarterback that is a decent athlete. I mean, we saw him running around against Notre Dame a little bit last year. That was more of a Notre Dame problem. They're coming off of a road game against NC State. I think that's going to be a challenge for them as well. I'm talking about Louisville.
Right.
So this is a game Notre Dame should win. They should win. And when I say convincingly, like 10-17, but at the end of the day, when you go on the road and you play a Power 5 team, just win. That's it.
Absolutely.
I think they will.
I've got them winning this game as well. I don't, this game doesn't worry me a whole lot. Literally the only thing that worries me is it's back-to-back road games.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and you've got USC coming up. Like this is
For
back-to-back
looking
trap
ahead,
games for me,
right? Looking ahead, are they doing that? Because at this point, you're going to be riding pretty high if you're undefeated. If you're Notre Dame,
Because you're going to be 6-0 at that point in time, and you're going to be a top 5 team.
Absolutely, 100%.
You know, so it's like, here's the thing that you learn. This is one of those games you learn a little something about your football team, though, Vince. Right. Is, do you start to believe the hype?
Right.
About yourself, or do you keep? Because here's the thing, we see it all the time, every year. Some team that's like feels disrespected. They go out there and they earn it, and they finally get theirs, and then they start feeling themselves a little bit, and then they go out there and get punched in the face by somebody because they think they're just going to roll the ball out, and that team's going to be afraid of them. Right. Louisville's not going to be afraid of Notre Dame. And if Louisville is struggling with a loss or two, then this is going to be their let's get our season back on track and go whoop Notre Dame's butt type of thing. Notre Dame's have a little target on their back if they're a top 5 team at that time. So this is where you learn if Coach Freeman can get a team that's feeling itself to play with that same chip on their shoulder.
Sure.
Because he's never been in that situation. He was ranked as a top 10 team last year for 2 games, and they lost both of them. Right. So Marcus Freeman has coached in 3 games with a top 10 team, and he's 0-3, right? Because they lost to Oklahoma State the year before. Now, I don't really count that the same as I've explained because that wasn't his team, but they still lost. And then they were number 5 last year, lost. Then they were number 8 when they played Marshall and lost. So, you know, can you get your team ready to play when maybe you are the superior team? And everybody does think highly of you. When they beat BC last year, Vince, they'd only been in the top 25 for 2 weeks. I mean, they'd been out of the top 25 all year. So I don't think beating Clemson and Navy started thinking, hey, we're champs. We're we're a playoff team. We're champion. No, this is where you find out, okay, we know how to handle adversity as a football team. This is where you learn for the first time in Marcus Freeman's tenure, this Duke-Louisville stretch is if they beat Ohio State. This is when you learn, when Marcus Freeman has to show that he knows how to get his football team prepared to handle success.
Right.
And you can be good at one and not the other. The great coaches are ones that can get their teams to be able to handle both.
Right.
And that's partly what's made Nick Saban so good over the years is he never lets his team feel themselves. And the teams that he has had that, disappointed. Last year's team was that way.
Right.
The 2010 team was that way. And we'll find out if who Coach Freeman is. But I have them winning this game.
Yep, me too. Another chance for us to see where Marcus Freeman is at as a head coach. I mean, if we're being honest, right? So, great opportunity. So, we both have Notre Dame undefeated 7-0 going into their 8th straight game. Remember, there's no bye weeks the first 8 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
But there's no looking past the final home game before the bye, and that is obviously Southern Cal, October 14th. Night game. Again, second night game in the stadium. This is a big one, and especially if Notre Dame is undefeated going into this game, which we both have them as, is a huge game. I mean, absolutely huge game.
Rivalry game.
Yeah.
USC is going to be undefeated at that time.
Agreed.
I mean, I don't see them losing at that point in time, Vince. They have San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, bye week, at Arizona State, at Colorado, home against Arizona. I mean, it's going to, to me, it's going to be most likely a top 5 matchup.
Right.
At worst, top 5 or 6 or 7 at Notre Dame, 6 or 7 at worst, and so, but I think most likely top 5 for the reasons we discussed early.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time since Notre Dame USC mattered that much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest. In 2017, they both had a loss. They were both very good, but at that time, it wasn't what this year's game is going to be if they're both undefeated, right? I mean, USC had already lost to Washington State. I think they were ranked like 11th or 12th at the time. Notre Dame was 13th. I'm looking it up now. They were 11th. Notre Dame was 13th. They weren't even both top 10 teams. Last year, Notre Dame was ranked, which was good to see, but they were barely inside the top 25. I think they were like 15th or 18th, something like that, right? Last year when they played each other. Yeah, Notre Dame was 15th, USC was 6th. So that's getting us closer to the kind of games you and I remember. Mm-hmm. Or at least, I don't know about you because you're a little bit younger, but like I remember these games from 1988 to growing up. So 1988, Notre Dame plays USC. It's number 1 Notre Dame versus number 2 USC, right? Like the next year, USC's number 9, Notre Dame's number 1. Like those are the games, Vince, that I remember. 7 versus 18.
Sure.
That was considered a down year. USC wasn't that good in 91. They started to fall off. 5 versus 19. 93, they were down a little bit again. But you can kind of see it though, Vince. There was a lot of those years, when I'm growing up, where this is a battle of really good football teams. And then you think of the 05 game, 2 top 10 teams, the epic matchup from that week. But we just haven't seen a ton of that in recent years.
Yeah.
And so, you look at 1995, Notre Dame, USC's number 5, Notre Dame's number 17, and Notre Dame wins by 28. So those are just the different things where this matchup has meant a lot. Notre Dame, I think you and I talked about this during the summer, right, Vince? How many championships Notre Dame would have if it wasn't for USC?
Oh, for sure.
And how many championships USC would have if it wasn't for Notre Dame?
Right.
Through all those decades. I mean, Coach Parsegian probably has 4 or 5 national titles if it's not for USC.
Right.
I mean, that was his kryptonite. Well, then, Notre Dame was USC's kryptonite at times in the 80s. You know what I mean? And, I just look forward to seeing that kind of matchup again. I really am. And I got Notre Dame winning.
Yeah, from a national perspective, from a big game perspective, this just has, if we're talking about people that have been watching Notre Dame football for the past 20 years or so, this has 2005 vibes to it. Like if everything shakes out the way we think it will, undefeated Notre Dame, undefeated USC, middle of October, like this has 05 vibes to it. You know what I mean? And I think the hype leading up to this game will be that. It's going to be a night game. You're going to have all of those things surrounding it. You're going to have, how many times are we going to see the fingernails, leading up to this game? The reigning Heisman Trophy winner. All the storylines are there, right? And I just feel like the only difference.
I'm sorry. I want to say this. I am not a big billboard guy. I'm just not that guy normally, but there comes a time and a place where it's like, you know what? I would literally print off 10 copies of Caleb Williams' fingers from last year with FND on it, and I would have them at every room in my locker room during the week. Yeah. Every meeting room, I just have a picture of it right there.
Yep.
I still think that stuff matters.
Yeah, it does matter. It absolutely matters. And I don't think they're going to need any extra fuel because I think there's going to be a ton of fuel. Doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt.
Exactly. It doesn't hurt at all. And the only difference between this game and the 05 game is I think Notre Dame comes out on top. I just think Notre Dame is the deeper team. I think
this is how we're powering through, though, Vince. Vince fought off a sneeze to predict Notre Dame to beat USC, y'all.
Yes,
this cat has allergies. You know how hard it is for him to fight off a sneeze to say Notre Dame's going to beat USC? That's how we're rolling here at Irish Breakdown tonight, folks. We're fired up. We're ready to go. Vince is going like this, like I'm beating his sneeze right now, baby. And you got it.
See, you gave it away to the podcast people, man. They didn't know.
Hey, man, they need to know. They need to have respect for my man, Vince.
Oh,
that's great. What happened. USC, the little USC dust is getting up in there, trying to make you sneeze. No, but here's the thing. Let's be practical, right? Like we're having some fun. We're doing our fan thing tonight. We're gonna have some bold predictions. They're gonna be a little crazy in a little bit. We're having some fun.
Sure.
But in all seriousness, the reality is Notre Dame has a better team than USC everywhere but quarterback. That to me, that's evident. Their receiving core is really good. It's not as good as Notre Dame's secondary. They couldn't even carve up the Notre Dame secondary last year without Tariq Bracy and without Cam Hart. They did it running the football.
Right. And then Jordan Addison
Williams doing some Hooperman stuff or Superman stuff. They had all
he had a cape on that game.
Notre Dame should win the trenches. Notre Dame, to me, can match USC skill-wise. The big difference is it's Caleb Williams. Well, now you're not going against Caleb Williams with Drew Pine. All due respect to Drew, who played the best game of his career against USC, by the way. But it's still Drew Pine versus Caleb Williams. Now you're going against him with a guy that has been in these battles before and can do some more damage. And it's at home. So,
right.
I got Notre Dame. I don't have the fear for USC like a lot of Notre Dame fans do. I just don't. I think this is still a team that if you take away Caleb Williams, I'll say it to you like this. What's USC's record this year if for some reason NCAA comes in and says, hey, Caleb Williams can't play this year for some crazy reason? What's USC's record this year? Nobody's picking them to be a playoff team.
Yeah.
It's 8-4, right? This is a talented USC team, but this isn't an elite USC roster top to bottom. It's a getting better USC roster, but it's still not there yet. Caleb Williams makes this team. And I think Notre Dame is going to be a little more prepared for this one.
Agreed.
I think that they're going to have the trenches advantage, in my opinion. They should. And and they're going to have the better offense. Hopefully they don't have the same losses last year that they did personnel wise, but I just don't think that USC matches up the way that some Notre Dame fans think they do against USC.
I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say this. Not necessarily nice, but a more succinct way of saying it. I just feel like, and maybe this is the old school in me talking, but the way that they've built their team, completely legal. I'm not saying that it's not, okay? The way they've built their team, it just feels to me like it's just held together with duct tape and super glue. You know what I mean? It's not.
And they're talking about all these transfers and all this, but I mean,
right?
I'm supposed to be, Bear Alexander. The guy's going there to get paid.
100%.
How in it is he for the, how down for the struggle is he when it comes to USC trying
flying
to
cross country, playing a night game in South Bend,
haven't really been tested yet.
Yeah, this isn't a team, and it's still college
if Notre Dame loses this game at home, I'll be disappointed.
I will be
of the big three games.
Really
this is the one that would most, and it's not even about the rivalry. This would be the one that would probably be the one that would be that's not an ideal situation for me.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you because they of the three, they're the worst team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I hate even using
I
hate even using the word worst because they're still a good football team.
Right.
But yeah, they're the least how about this, Vince? They're the least complete team.
There you go.
Of the big three.
I'll take that one.
They need their quarterback to carry them more.
Right.
I'll put it like if you flipped quarterbacks and you put Kyle McCord at USC and Caleb Williams at Ohio State, nobody's beating Ohio State. I mean, it'd be really hard to beat Ohio State if Caleb Williams had that team.
It would be Ohio State and everybody else.
And Ohio State, USC is an 8-4, 7-5 team. If you put Kyle McCord, with all due respect to Kyle McCord, they're an 8-4 team, maybe 9-3. But they're probably still undefeated coming into the Notre Dame game. But you look at the end of their schedule, Vince, they're going to have a hard time beating Notre Dame without Caleb. They'd have a hard time beating Utah. They'd have a hard time beating Washington, Oregon. They got to play UCLA. They got to play at Cal. They're catching 3-4 L's during that stretch if they don't have Caleb Williams, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's just.
I don't think you are.
I don't think they have the offensive line that can carry that team.
Right. You're definitely not wrong. You're definitely not wrong about the impact that he would have at Ohio State. That offense would be untouchable. It just would be, So All right, so we both got Notre Dame 8-0 going into their bye week, where this Pitt game now, it's obviously at home. It is an afternoon, back to the afternoon games, end of October. You're going to have people dressed up for Halloween, the whole thing. This would be more of a trap game for me if there wasn't a bye in between.
Yeah, I still am ticked off that you don't have your kids come over our house for trick or treat. Live in the same freaking neighborhood.
They will this year, I can tell you that.
Okay.
They will. I feel like you guys didn't hand out candy the year
last year. We didn't.
That's what it was.
That's because the year before we had all this candy, and we were sitting on our porch. I'm like, I was like, am I giving off some weird creeper vibes or something? Because we're sitting on our porch with candy, and kids are just walking past, just nonstop. I'm like, what the hell, man? You know what I mean? We got good stuff too, right? I mean,
did you have your lights on?
Yes, but dude, we were sitting on the porch. With a bag of candy, visible. On that one. Yeah. So I don't know what the heck was going on, man. But
we're coming by whether your lights are on or not. We're ding donging you. All right, it's happening. So
just made it weird, but we can.
I know I did. there's a line, and I always jump over it. It's just what I do.
Habitual line stepper.
Yeah, I really am. It's all good.
No, but to your breakdown though. Yeah, I think the bye week gives them a chance to recover mentally.
Agreed.
From what's going to be a really challenging 4-game stretch, mentally and physically. It'll be a nice physical recovery time and a nice mental recovery time.
Right.
And it'll be good to be back home. And midterms are in the past for the non-graduates. Yeah, and I think at this point in time, you're 8-0, you're top 4. when does the first college football playoff ranking doesn't come out yet? Correct.
I thought it comes out like the first week in November.
Okay,
Usually,
yeah.
because it's
Well, it's
usually
come out
about 4 or
in October, I
5.
believe, before.
Okay. All right.
I have to look. I'm going to type this up, but so I just you're tasting it now, right,
Oh,
Vince? And I think
yeah.
it'll be a little easier to get up for games now if you get through that. If you get through that gauntlet, 7-1 or 8-0, you're tasting it now.
Yeah.
Your destiny
Yeah.
is to a degree in your hands.
Right. Agreed.
You know, that's kind of where, and so it's a little easier to not overlook a Pitt team.
Right.
at that point
Absolutely.
in time.
And here's one thing I can guarantee you, there's death, taxes, and blank, right?
Yeah.
It's death, taxes, and Phil Dracovi's gonna say something stupid in the news to get people fired up. Like, that's gonna happen.
I really hope not.
So do I. I hope he's matured enough where that's not the case at this point. But
I'll say that I just looked up the first college football playoff poll comes out the Tuesday after the Pitt game.
Okay. Gotcha.
So this is your final statement before. I mean, you're in the top 4 if you beat Pitt, in my opinion.
Yes.
You'll have a win over Ohio State, a win over USC, a win over Duke, a win over NC State. You'll be in the top.
It'll be fun. Like when we do the live reaction show to the rankings, it's going to be fun to see where Notre Dame lands, because they will be in the top 4 if that has taken place. Right. I mean,
so both catching this W's
100%,
right
100%.
versus Pitt. So 9-0.
9-0. Now here's the last of the big 3. You're going on the road first weekend in November. You're carrying with you a lofty ranking at this point. You're going into Clemson. Clemson remembers what happened the year before at Notre Dame Stadium.
Dabo is a master motivator.
He will motivate them. They are also going to be, by the way, a much better football team top to bottom than they were the year before.
Agree.
And you give Cade Klubnik, what, 9 or 10 games at this point, 9 games to kind of get his feet wet as the starter. With this one. And I'll just go ahead and say it. This is where I have Notre Dame slipping up. I've got them catching a loss here. I think this is going to be a very, very difficult game for them. I still think it's going to be competitive. I just think I had a hard time going undefeated for Notre Dame. I had to pick a loss. I think this is the clearest place for me, unless they just stub their toe someplace. I think going on the road to Clemson, I think Clemson's going to be much better this year than they were last year. It's going to be a tough game, and I've got Notre Dame losing this game.
I can't do it, man. I can't do it. I can't do it. First of all, anyone saying Cade Klubnik is overrated, just stop, right? Like, this isn't a homer show. The kid's a really good football player.
Yes.
I just don't think I just think at the end of the day, I just get back to the fact that you've got a guy like Sam Hartman. As long as he's healthy, you've got a defense that matches up very well with Clemson, in my opinion. I think Clemson will have a hard time consistently moving the football. And I just think Notre Dame will be in better position to take advantage of their secondary this year. I'm not a huge Clemson secondary guy. I think their corners are pretty good.
Sure.
I think Nate Wiggins is a really good football player. Sheridan Jones is good, but they're guys Notre Dame could have success with. But the slot linebacker matchup, especially the slot safety matchup, and even the slot linebacker matchup for me is one that I think Notre Dame can handle. I think Notre Dame can still run the football. I mean, you couldn't stop Notre Dame's run game last year. You're not just going to go out and repeat that performance the same way you did it. But if you're able to throw the football, now you can run the football on them. If your offensive line is as good as we hope it is, and that's still a little bit of a question mark for me right now. We'll see how it goes. But the more I look at events, and then we get down to it, and I just can't do it, man. I got Notre Dame winning. I mean, I just think about you went down on there in 2015 and almost beat them in a game. Notre Dame had a shanked punt that went like 12 yards to set up a Clemson touchdown. They fumbled it like an opening kickoff in the second half to set up a Clemson touchdown. Then they fumbled their next possession, or it was you fumbled your first possession and they scored. Then you fumbled a kickoff and then they almost scored, but Cole Luke picks a pass off. You miss how many opportunities in that game? You have Alzey Mack running wide open for a touchdown. You throw into double coverage to Corey Robinson and gets broken up. There just were so many things where Notre Dame tried to lose that game and still had a chance with less than a minute to go to tie it. And you've beaten them the other 2 regular season games. For whatever reason, Notre Dame plays really well against Clemson in the regular season. They just have.
You're right.
And I just think this team is going to be hungry, and I think Sam Hartman is going to be hungry, because you got to think about it, Vince. This is the giant that Sam Hartman could never slay.
Right.
And it's kind of like, he went in there, he had some good receivers, but it was like, like, to me, I feel like, I like to use Avenger analogies, right? And Sam Hartman and his receivers last year were like when Cap, Thor, and Iron Man were trying to fight Thanos by themselves. Like, hey, we put up a good fight for a second. Cap picks up Mjolnir. He gets a couple blows in. At the end of the day, Thanos still won. Right? I mean, that's how it was with him, because he had no defense. The offensive line couldn't block anybody. It was Sam throwing dimes and his receivers making great catches, and it still wasn't good enough. Now it's kind of like that scene that they get their butts kicked for a minute, but now Sam transferred to Notre Dame, and he's Cap, strapping up the thing, and all of a sudden, like, Black Panther comes through with all of Wakanda, and then all of a sudden, all the Asgardians come through, right? And it's like, Ant-Man bursts through the Avengers facility. He's got Hulk, and he's got it just start getting like, okay, I got my boys now, and that's how I kind of feel like about this game. This is probably the game for me that Sam Hartman's going to be most amped for, to prove himself. I think the Wake game's going to be the most emotional, but I think this is the game where he's going to say, I've accomplished all these things. By this point in the season, if Sam Hartman is healthy, he's going to be a top 10 all-time passing quarterback. There's going to be one thing that he's never done. He's 2-0 against Jordan Travis. He's played in an ACC championship game. He's done all these things. You know what he's never done? Beat Clemson. And this is going to be his best chance, and I just feel like this is going to be a game that Notre Dame is going to win. I'll say something at the end of it, but I think this is a game that Notre Dame wins. I'm in full. I'm in just, how I am, Vince. I can't convince myself to say they're going to lose this game.
See,
so
this was hard for me, because I could very easily convince myself that Notre Dame wins this game from a matchup standpoint, from all of it, right?
I know I'm cheating a little bit.
Totally could. There's no doubt about it. But I'm trying really hard to be as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me, people. I want you to understand. Anybody that knows me knows that this is very difficult for me, because nobody on this planet would be happier with a Notre Dame victory at Clemson than I would be. So I just want to make sure I put that out there. But that's where I'm at. I'm going to stick with it. Going into week 11, or I should say game 11. It's not week 11. I know,
right?
Okay. So senior day, this, like you said, emotional game for Sam Hartman. Another bye after the Clemson game, by the way. Then they have their final home game of the season, Wake Forest. Sam Hartman going up against his old boys, his old coaching staff, all of the above. I guess I'm just happy that this game is at Notre Dame Stadium and not down in Winston-Salem. To be honest with you, I don't think the outcome would be any different.
I actually think the opposite. I actually think if it was in Winston-Salem, Sam would go off.
Okay, fair enough.
It's just comfort level. You know what I mean? It's just
good point. He's had some hella games down there in that stadium, that's for sure. So either way, bottom line, Wake Forest doesn't match up with Notre Dame in any way, shape, or form, and I'm taking Notre Dame.
Same. Notre Dame would have to play really poorly. They don't have the defense. They don't have the offensive line. Even without Donovan Green, if he's still out by then, they still have a very good receiving core. I mean, Keyshawn Williams, Taylor Marin, Jamal Banks, they don't have the running backs. They don't have the O-line. They don't have the defense to come on the road and beat a Notre Dame team that is at worst 9-1. Based on our predictions, at worst 9-1. Now, if Notre Dame is scuffling and they've already dropped a few games and they're just not the team that we think they're going to be, then I get a little worried about that game, because, what are you playing for now?
Sure.
Our season's over. Yeah. We don't have a playoff we don't have a playoff to fight for.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And this is the kind of game it's the epitome of, this encapsulates everything that went wrong for our football team this year. That's the only way Notre Dame loses to Wake, in my opinion. I think they win. I think they win this football game, and kind of going away a little bit, to be honest with you. It could maybe look like the 2017 game, where it really wasn't that close, but Wake scored a couple times late on your backups to make it an 11-point game. Remember that in 17? It was 48-37, but it wasn't that close.
Right.
I mean, they scored 2 touchdowns, I believe, on Notre Dame's backup defense. Notre Dame had already pulled their starters at that point in time. I mean, they had over 700 yards of offense, Notre Dame did. So it could maybe look like that, Vince, but that's about as close as I think it gets.
If we're really jumping into the X's and O's, I just think Notre Dame's defensive line is going to brutalize the slow mesh. It's just that's how you beat the slow mesh. By the way, you blow it up, and I just think Notre Dame's going to do that. So,
and that's why Clemson had so much success against it the 2 previous years with Brent Venables.
Correct.
And last year it was the same thing that hurt them against Notre Dame. They just tried to play their base defense,
right,
and
can't
play
do
ball,
that against
and
that.
they couldn't do that.
Yeah,
and so Hartman was getting a little bit cleaner pockets than he'd ever had against Clemson before. Where before they just attack him and just hit him all game. I watched the game he played at Clemson. I think it was 2021, and they just physically beat the crap out of him in that game.
Yeah,
because like you said, they just attacked the heck out of the mesh.
Right.
And
that's the recipe to beat Wake Forest, man.
Yeah.
You can't just sit back and let them do it. I mean,
in similar ways, it's like the option. You just you force them to get the ball out, and you don't let them carry that stuff out. You go after it.
Yeah.
And that's what Clemson has done in the past, and that's what I think Notre Dame does.
Final game of the season, November 25th, on the road, Stanford. If Notre Dame has anything to them, there's no way they lose this game. I'm sorry,
Vince.
Not 2 years in a row.
I'm going to raise it a little bit. If this team has any stones, any pride, they're not only going to just win this game, they're going to destroy Stanford.
Yeah.
Because number one, Stanford is got some talent, but it's a very at certain spots, but it's a very thin football team.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a little bit of payback. So one of two things is going to be true if Notre Dame is who we hope they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're 10-1, and they need a statement win against Stanford.
Right.
Or they're 11-0, and you're the only thing standing between us and a chance to play for a championship.
Sure.
Either way, if Notre Dame is in either of those situations, they absolutely curb stomp Stanford.
Right.
Now, where I could see it being a struggle is again, they've got 4 losses already, and they're just kind of falling apart as a team, and they're just not who we think that they're going to be. That's the only way that I think this game is competitive. I think if either one of the scenarios that you and I have right now, undefeated or 10-1, and Stanford is our last chance to make a statement to the committee, maybe 5th or 6th, we got to go show them. And that's the other thing too, is if you're correct and they lose to Clemson, that might drop them out of the top 4.
That's tough because it's towards the end of the season, all of that.
It might. Yeah, so your next 2 games, and you have a bye week after Clemson. So your next 2 games are we have a Marcus Freeman knows this. We have a state. If we want to play for championship, we have to make statements these next 2 games, which means, sorry, Dave Clawson, I think you're a heck of a coach and a great guy, and I actually believe that to be
I'll
true.
buy you a beer after the game.
I interviewed with Dave Clawson for a back office job when I was younger in my career. Drove up. He was at Richmond. I really respect the heck out of that guy. Really good dude. But I'm sorry, I love you, man. But if I'm Mark, we got to do this. This is all that we got to do what we got to do, right? Yeah. Same thing against, hey, Coach Taylor. We love and respect you as an academic institution, but we've got to go make a statement here. And I actually think the worst thing that could happen to Stanford is if Notre Dame has a loss. I do. Because if Notre Dame's 11-0, it just beat Stanford and you're in. It doesn't matter if you win 13-10. It doesn't matter. You're in.
Right.
If you have a loss, this is a statement game. Hey guys, we have to leave such an impression on the voters that it lasts 2 weeks.
Right. Through the conference championships.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys did this, but did you watch what Notre Dame did to Stanford two years ago? Right. 2 weeks ago. You have to leave such a bitter taste a bitter taste in Stanford's mouth. Basically, you got to leave such a strong impression. Hey, look how we rallied back from this loss.
Right.
We are one of the 4 best teams.
It's like, sorry guys, we had to beat your tush, but we'll still put a good word in for you with the ACC.
Yeah.
Like, sorry,
but we got some things to do here.
You're right.
So I think if Notre Dame's 11-0, I think that game could actually maybe be a little sloppy early.
Yeah.
Kind of like the 2012 USC game. That was not a very good USC team.
Right.
And Notre Dame
was way closer than it needed to be.
Good, and they just they won it, but they got that lead, and they just said, "Okay, we've got the lead. We're gonna," because Notre Dame actually outplayed USC pretty well early, and then they got that lead, and they're just like, "Let's just hang on."
Yeah.
You know, like, let's just hang on for dear life and just don't do anything to let USC get back in the game. I could see something like Notre Dame jumps on them, 20-3 early, and they start running the football to run the clock out. Like, hey, guys, we're 12-0. We just need to get the W, right? So
Right.
I'm not going to take a chance of dropping back, giving up a pit 6. We're up 26 or 20-7. Let's just run the ball and get out of here with a W. But if they're 11-10-1 and they got a statement to make, it's remember the Titans, man. Run it up, leave no doubt. I mean, it's, I don't want them to gain another yard. I mean, whatever movie cliche you want to use, it's beatdown time. We have to. We have no choice. That's the way that this works.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's where I'm at.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So if we're going by our predictions, you've got 12-0. I've got 11-1.
I just both. I'll say this, Vince.
Yeah.
In my head, as an analyst, I think if Notre Dame is the team I think they're going to be, I think they're an 11-1 team.
Yeah. That's where I was at.
The problem is I can't pick which game it's going to be.
Correct.
Because as you said, I don't think Clemson's better than Notre Dame.
Right.
I think Notre Dame matches up. I think that they have the better team top to bottom. They have the better quarterback. They have the better skill players. They have, the lines are at best for Clemson equal. So it's kind of one of those things that I look at it and I say, yeah, I'm going 12-0 when you do a game by game prediction.
Sure.
But in my head, as an analyst, I see 11-1. I just don't know who that one is going to be to.
Sure. Yep. And that's how I was going into it.
Sense.
I was like, okay, I'm thinking 11-1. Now I've got to find a loss. Like, where's that loss going to be? And that's why I landed on Clemson on the road.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I was at with the whole thing. So either way, 11-1, 12-0, Notre Dame has a chance to do some special things in the postseason. And that's how I feel about that.